The Collins estate gleamed beneath the morning sun, its manicured lawn and ivory walls projecting serenity to anyone passing by. From the street it was the image of success, a mansion with tall gates, luxury cars parked neatly, and a silence broken only by birdsong. Yet inside the air felt different, stiff, hollow, heavy with things unsaid. David Collins sat at the polished oak dining table, coffee steaming untouched before him. His dark suit was pressed, his tie knotted to perfection, but his eyes were elsewhere, fixed on numbers glowing across his tablet screen. He barely glanced up when Sophia entered, her silk robe brushing softly against the marble floor. She carried herself with elegance, her beauty striking, but her gaze flickered toward him and away again, as though the sight of her husband demanded effort she could no longer sustain. "Morning," she said, her tone light, almost rehearsed. David murmured, "Morning," without lifting his eyes. The pause that followed was filled only by the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. Sophia poured herself orange juice, the clink of glass against glass cutting through the quiet. From the staircase above, footsteps sounded. Ethan descended slowly, his broad frame casting a shadow across the room. At 21, he was caught between youth and manhood, his jaw sharp yet his expression restless, defiant. His eyes brushed against Sophia's before shifting to his father, and the faintest trace of disdain curled across his lips. "Big meeting today?" Ethan asked, his voice edged with challenge. David's gaze remained fixed on the screen. "Every day's a big meeting." Sophia's hand trembled slightly as she set down her glass. Ethan caught it, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them before he looked away, hiding the tension behind a careless shrug. Breakfast passed in fragments. The scrape of cutlery, the shuffle of paper, the sigh of someone trying to fill silence that refused to be filled. From the outside, the family looked composed, united, enviable. But inside the walls, tiny fractures widened with every word unsaid. Later that evening, guests arrived for a small gathering David had insisted upon. The house filled with laughter and clinking glasses. But even in company, the cracks showed. David charmed investors with stories of markets and expansion, his arm loosely around Sophia, though she leaned away the moment eyes weren't on them. Ethan drifted at the edge of the room, his smirk lingering too long when Sophia's laughter carried across the air. Neighbors admired the family, whispering admiration for their wealth and beauty. No one noticed the tension hiding in Sophia's smile, or the way Ethan's gaze lingered on her with something that wasn't merely familial. By the end of the night, the house stood quiet again, stripped of its borrowed noise. David retreated to his study, the glow of his laptop painting his face in cold blue light. Upstairs, Sophia closed her bedroom door, her reflection in the mirror marked by unease. Across the hall, Ethan lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, his jaw tight with restless thoughts. The house, perfect to the world outside, was already trembling beneath the weight of secrets it could no longer contain. The following evening stretched long and quiet. David sat in his study again, the glow of spreadsheets flickering across his glasses. His hand hovered over the mouse, yet his eyes drifted to the clock on the wall. 11:15. Sophia had excused herself to bed hours earlier, claiming fatigue. Ethan's music had faded too. Still, something gnawed at David, a sharp edge of restlessness that kept him from focusing. He stood, straightened his tie, and moved through the dim hallways of the estate. The house was vast but hushed, every corner holding shadows. He passed the staircase, his footsteps silent against the thick carpet, until he reached the hallway leading to the bedrooms. A faint murmur caught his ear, soft, quick, urgent. David stopped. From behind the half-closed door of the guest room came muffled voices, overlapping breaths. His chest tightened as he leaned closer, careful not to disturb the creak of wood beneath him. Sophia's voice, low and trembling. "We can't keep doing this." Ethan's reply came in a whisper, hot and reckless. "You say that every time." Silence followed, broken only by the rustle of sheets. David's hand froze on the doorknob. The weight of betrayal pressed against his ribs, forcing the air from his lungs. He didn't push the door open, didn't storm inside. He stayed there, watching through the sliver of space between frame and wood. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, her robe slipping down her shoulder. Ethan leaned close behind her, his hands on her waist, his eyes burning with something David recognized all too well, desire unbound by shame. For a moment David felt his body falter, his knees threatening to give way. The humiliation seared hotter than rage. His son, his wife, under his own roof. Sophia's whisper broke again. "If he finds out, he won't," Ethan cut her off, pressing his mouth against her neck. "He doesn't see you, not like I do." David's hand fell away from the door. Slowly, with mechanical precision, he stepped back into the hallway. The voices blurred behind him as he returned to his study, each step heavier than the last. Inside the safety of the locked room, he sank into the leather chair, but the air around him vibrated with the memory of what he'd seen. He clasped his trembling hands together, pressing them against his lips, forcing back the shout clawing at his throat. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion, no longer an unease. It was truth, raw and merciless. Hours passed before the first light crept through the window. At the breakfast table the next morning, David sat in silence, his coffee untouched as Sophia entered with her usual grace. Her smile faltered when she noticed his eyes fixed firmly on her face, searching, dissecting. Ethan arrived moments later, hair disheveled, voice careless, mourning. David offered no reply. He folded the newspaper, set it down, and stood. His gaze lingered on Sophia, then shifted to his son. For the first time, Ethan looked away first, the cocky spark dimming under the weight of his father's stare. "Long night?" David asked quietly. Sophia froze. Ethan forced a laugh. "Just couldn't sleep." David's lips curved faintly, almost a smile, though it carried no warmth. Happens to all of us." He left the table, retreating to his study without another word. Sophia and Ethan exchanged a glance, hers nervous, his defiant. Neither spoke, but both felt the shift. Something had changed. Behind the closed door of his study, David leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling. His silence was no accident. Rage was loud, but silence had weight. The perfect family portrait had cracked. The frame still hung on the wall, but the fracture lines had begun to spread. Days passed, but David never spoke of what he had seen. His silence wrapped the house like invisible chains, binding Sophia and Ethan in dread. He went about his routine with mechanical precision, leaving early, returning late, eating meals without conversation. Yet every glance he cast lingered too long, too sharp, as though dissecting both of them without a word. Sophia felt it first. She noticed how David's footsteps paused outside her door at night, how his eyes seemed to follow her hands when she poured his coffee. His restraint frightened her more than rage would have. Rage was explosive, finite. Silence stretched forever. One evening, as she prepared dinner, Ethan stormed into the kitchen. His jaw clenched, his voice low. "He knows. I can feel it." Sophia froze, knife suspended over the cutting board. "Oh, don't say that," she whispered. "You don't know." "Yes, I do," Ethan cut her off, stepping closer. "He looks at me like I'm already guilty, like he's just waiting." Sophia's hands trembled, the knife clattering against the counter. "Then stop giving him reason. We shouldn't have." Ethan caught her wrist, his grip firm, eyes fierce. "Don't start this now. You wanted me as much as I wanted you." Her chest heaved, torn between fear and desire. Before she could reply, David's voice echoed from the doorway, calm and deep. "Dinner ready soon?" Sophia jerked away from Ethan, fumbling to steady herself. "Yes," she answered quickly, her tone unnaturally bright. David's eyes swept over the two of them, pausing on their uneasy distance, then moved on as if he hadn't noticed. He sat at the dining table, opening the newspaper with surgical calm. That night, the meal unfolded in strained silence. Ethan stabbed at his food. Sophia barely touched hers. David ate slowly, deliberately, his composure unshaken. When Sophia attempted small talk about the weather, David looked up, his gaze locking hers. "Strange thing about storms," he said quietly. "You see the sky change long before it breaks. Sophia's fork slipped from her hand, clattering against the plate. Ethan shot her a warning glance, but David only smiled faintly and returned to his meal. In the following days, David's silence grew heavier. He worked later hours, yet Sophia would catch him lingering outside rooms, listening. Ethan began staying out at night, avoiding the house altogether. When he returned, his steps were louder, his laughter forced, as though daring his father to say something. One afternoon, Sophia found David in his study, papers spread across his desk, but his eyes unfocused. "David," she began, her voice tentative, "is something wrong?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Wrong?" A pause. "Everything's fine." But the weight in his tone betrayed the lie. Sophia felt the chill coil around her spine. She wanted to press him, to confess, but fear sealed her lips. That evening, neighbors noticed how withdrawn the Collins family had become. The once lively estate now seemed muted, curtains drawn more often, cars leaving at odd hours. Whispers began. Perhaps David's business was in trouble. Perhaps Sophia was unhappy. Perhaps Ethan resented his stepmother. None guessed the truth, but everyone sensed something was rotting inside the house. Upstairs, Ethan confronted Sophia again. "We can't let him control us with silence. He's trying to break us." Sophia's voice cracked. "Maybe he already has." Across the hall, David sat alone in his room, meticulously writing in a leather-bound journal. His pen scratched steadily against the paper, each word deliberate, methodical. His face betrayed nothing. But inside, the storm had already begun to form, and storms never wait forever. The Collins home on that Friday evening felt unusually still. The table was set with polished silverware, wine glasses catching the soft light of the chandelier. Sophia had tried to make the dinner look elegant, a peace offering woven into roasted lamb and carefully chosen wine. But beneath the fragrance of herbs and garlic, tension hung heavier than the aroma. David entered last, his footsteps measured, his face unreadable. He sat at the head of the table, unfolded his napkin, and poured wine with steady hands. Sophia forced a smile, though her pulse hammered in her throat. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching his father like a challenger waiting for the first blow. For a time, the only sounds were cutlery against porcelain. Then David set down his fork, his gaze lingering on his son. "Ethan," he said softly, "do you ever think about the weight of choices?" Ethan stiffened. "Depends on the choice." David's eyes shifted to Sophia. "Some choices change everything. They can destroy families, reputations, love." Sophia's hand shook as she reached for her glass. Ethan leaned forward, his voice sharper. "If you've got something to say, just say it." David smiled faintly. "Patience, son. Truth reveals itself in its own time." The rest of the meal unfolded under a suffocating silence. Sophia barely swallowed more than a bite. When David finally rose, he brushed his napkin across his lips and looked at them both with unsettling calm. "Thank you for dinner," he murmured, then left the table. That night, Sophia stood trembling in front of Ethan in his room. "He knows he's torturing us with it." Ethan's eyes flashed. "Then let him. What's he going to do? Tell the world his wife and son betrayed him? He'd look pathetic." Her voice broke. "You don't understand. He's not the type to shout. He's the type to plan." Ethan grabbed her shoulders. "You're scared of him, I'm not." But even as he said it, unease flickered in his eyes. Downstairs, David sat alone in his study. On his desk lay a receipt for a firearm, purchased that afternoon. His hand rested on the folder, his gaze fixed on the wall. He didn't need to shout or accuse. He would wait, patiently, until the right moment arrived. The following day, David moved through the house with a strange calm. He lingered in doorways, his presence quiet but suffocating. Sophia avoided him, flinching at every sudden sound. Ethan grew restless, pacing, leaving the house for hours before returning in the dead of night. On Sunday morning, Sophia found herself in the garden, staring at roses she could no longer admire. She heard David's voice behind her, low, deliberate. "Beautiful things don't last when they're poisoned." She turned sharply, eyes wide. His face betrayed nothing, only that same faint smile. Later that night, Ethan confronted his father directly. He stepped into the study, fists clenched. "Stop playing games. If you know something, say it." David looked up from his journal, his tone chillingly even. "You're right. Games waste time. Time is precious." Ethan's anger faltered under the calmness, but before he could speak again, David closed the journal and stood, towering over him. "Remember this, Ethan," he whispered. "The storm always comes." Ethan left, unsettled for the first time. In her room, Sophia sat against the bed, head in her hands, whispering to herself, 4 days. That's all it takes, 4 days, before something breaks. The silence had cracked. What followed would not be silence anymore. The Monday sun rose over the Collins estate, but inside the house, light could not soften the atmosphere. David moved with unnerving serenity, his voice almost tender. At breakfast he poured Sophia's coffee himself, sliding the cup toward her with a polite smile. "You take it with sugar, don't you?" he asked, though he knew the answer. Sophia's hand trembled as she reached for it. Ethan watched closely, suspicion etched across his face. The gesture should have been ordinary, but the calmness wrapped around it like a blade hidden in silk. Later that evening, David appeared in the kitchen while Sophia cooked. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but heavy. "You've brought warmth to this house," he murmured. His tone carried no anger, yet Sophia shivered as though his fingers burned. Day 2. On Tuesday, Ethan returned home after midnight, his hair damp with sweat, his eyes darting as if chased by unseen ghosts. He crept into Sophia's room, whispering, "He's watching me. Everywhere I go, I feel it." Sophia pressed her palms to her temples. "You're imagining it." "No," Ethan hissed. "He's waiting for something. I don't know what, but it's coming." Down the hall, David stood in his doorway, shadowed by the dim light, listening. He closed the door softly, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Day 3. By Wednesday, Sophia's nerves unraveled. She barely ate, barely spoke. She found herself standing by the front door with her suitcase half packed, her hand on the handle, heart racing with the thought of escape. But Ethan blocked her path. "Don't. If you leave, he wins. Stay with me." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, this isn't love, it's madness." He gripped her arms. "Then let me be mad with you. I won't lose you." His desperation frightened her as much as David's silence. She pulled away, but the echo of his words clung to her. That night, David appeared unusually affectionate again, complimenting Sophia's dress at dinner, asking Ethan about his day. His voice was warm, almost paternal, but underneath Sophia heard the ticking of a clock, counting down to something inevitable. Day 4. Thursday arrived with a deceptive calm. The family gathered for dinner, the chandelier casting golden light over polished silverware. David carved the roast with slow precision, his movements practiced, his expression unreadable. Ethan tried to mask his tension with forced laughter, but every glance toward his father revealed unease. Sophia sat rigid, her appetite gone, her breath shallow. Halfway through the meal, David raised his glass. "To family," he said softly, his eyes fixed on them both. Sophia's lips parted, but no words came. Ethan stared back, defiance faltering against the weight of his father's gaze. Then came the sound, sharp, thunderous, final. A gunshot split the silence. Screams followed, neighbors later swearing they heard 2, then 3. The house that once radiated wealth and perfection now pulsed with chaos. Glass shattered, furniture crashed, and then, just as suddenly, silence fell again. Outside, the neighborhood lights flickered on, curtains twitched, and whispers began. But no one entered. No one dared. By midnight the Collins estate was dark, its walls holding secrets soaked in blood. The storm David had promised had arrived, and it left nothing untouched. The sirens came just after midnight, their red and blue lights painting the Collins estate in restless color. Neighbors had dialed frantically after hearing the screams and shots, but none dared to cross the gates until uniformed officers arrived. The heavy front door was unlocked, its hinges groaning as police pushed inside. The silence within was thick, broken only by the crunch of boots against shattered glass. The chandelier above the dining table swayed gently, fragments of crystal scattered across the floor. Plates of food remained untouched, wine spilled like blood across the linen. In the dining room lay Sophia, collapsed near her chair, a crimson bloom spreading across her silk dress. Her lifeless eyes stared upward, as though still frozen in shock. Across from her, Ethan sprawled against the wall, his body crumpled, his hand stretched out as if reaching for someone he would never touch again. At the head of the table, David Collins slumped forward, the gun clutched loosely in his hand. His expression was eerily calm, even in death, as though he had finally delivered the storm he had promised. Detective Harris, first on scene, muttered under his breath, "God Almighty." He motioned for the coroner's team, his jaw tightening as he studied the bodies. The arrangement of the room told its own story, no forced entry, no sign of struggle beyond the frantic chaos of those last minutes. By morning, news vans lined the street. Reporters whispered theories into microphones, cameras flashing against the police tape. To the outside world it was unthinkable. The wealthy businessman, his beautiful wife, his promising son, all gone in one night. A family once envied was now reduced to a headline dripping with scandal. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones. "They seemed perfect," one insisted. "Always so polite, so composed." Another shook his head. There was something off. You could feel it. Inside the investigation room, evidence piled up. David's journal revealed cryptic lines written over the last 4 days. Storms cleanse. Betrayal burns. Silence prepares the ground for truth. Each page dripped with quiet fury, every word calculated, like a man documenting the countdown to disaster. Sophia's phone showed late-night messages with Ethan. Threads of passion tangled with fear. One read, "If he finds out, it will destroy us." Another, "He already knows." The detectives pieced the fragments together, a forbidden affair, a father's discovery, and 4 days of unbearable tension that ended in blood. But behind the facts, a deeper unease lingered. Was David's act premeditated revenge, or a psychological collapse under the unbearable weight of betrayal? The funeral came swiftly, though the family name carried shame rather than honor now. 3 caskets stood side by side, flowers wilting in the afternoon sun. The whispers of scandal echoed louder than the prayers spoken. Relatives avoided the press, their eyes downcast, unwilling to meet the stares of a world that feasted on their tragedy. In the weeks that followed, the Collins estate was emptied, its doors locked, its windows covered. Yet locals swore they felt a heaviness every time they passed, as though the walls themselves remembered. Some claimed to see a flicker of light in the study at night, others heard faint whispers near the garden where Sophia once lingered. The story became more than crime. It became caution. A tale parents warned their children about. A headline repeated on late-night talk shows. A documentary whispered over with hushed narration. The perfect family portrait had shattered beyond repair, its frame now dripping with shadows. The Collins home, once envied, stood as nothing more than a monument to betrayal, silence, and the storm that had consumed them all.